The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. No, wait. Let's not start with a quote this time. Let's start with you. Not the version of you that smiles in front of friends. Not the one who says, "I'm fine," while silently drowning. I mean the real you, the one that wakes up at 3 a.m. with a tight chest, wondering why everything hurts when nothing is technically wrong. There's a kind of pain that doesn't leave bruises, no scars, no obvious cause. And yet, it bleeds into everything. Your relationships, your self-worth, your ability to feel safe, to be seen, to be loved. You try to move on, to stay busy, to be strong, but no matter how far you go, it follows. You hear it in your overreactions. You see it in the people you chase, or the ones you run from. You feel it in the silence after conflict, when you're left asking, "Why am I like this?" This is emotional trauma, not the loud kind, not war or car crashes. I'm talking about the quiet kind, the kind that happens when you're 5 years old and no one comes to comfort you, when your feelings are dismissed, when love is conditional, when safety means silence, and you carry that child into adulthood, still waiting to be held. This video is not a motivational speech. It's not about thinking positive or fixing yourself in 30 days. This is a descent into your pain, into your past, into the parts of you you buried just to survive. But here's the truth. You don't heal by forgetting. You heal by remembering, with compassion. This is the journey of becoming whole again. Not perfect, not unbreakable, just real. Let's begin. You weren't born broken. You came into this world with an open heart, soft hands and wide eyes. You trusted easily. You reached for affection. You expressed yourself without fear. And then, something happened. Maybe it was neglect. Maybe it was criticism disguised as tough love. Maybe it was growing up in a house where emotions were punished or ignored. Maybe no one ever told you they were proud of you. Maybe someone did, but only when you became who they wanted you to be. Whatever it was, it taught you a dangerous lesson. I must become someone else to be safe. That's where the fracture begins, not in adulthood, but in childhood, when you had no power to understand what was happening, so you blamed yourself. That inner child didn't vanish. They just got buried beneath layers of coping. And here's what most people never realize. Emotional trauma is not the event. It's the meaning you internalized. It's the belief that your needs were too much, that love must be earned, that your feelings are dangerous, that silence is safer than truth. You didn't learn these things by choice. You learned them by survival. And those lessons, they don't just disappear when you turn 18. They evolve into people-pleasing, overachieving, emotional numbness. You tell yourself you're independent or strong, but really, you're terrified of being abandoned again. This is why healing has to begin with the inner child, the part of you that's still waiting for the hug they never got, the part of you that's still terrified of being too loud, too needy, too real, the part of you that didn't need fixing, only safety. You may be an adult now, but that child still lives inside. And every time you judge yourself, you judge them. Every time you ignore your needs, you ignore theirs. Every time you fake who you are to be loved, you abandon them all over again. But there's another path, one where you turn inward, not to shame that child, but to finally listen, to hear their cry, to hold their fear, to tell them, "You're safe now, I've got you." Because healing doesn't mean becoming someone new. It means remembering who you were before the world told you to be someone else. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. You don't always fall in love with people. Sometimes you fall into patterns, familiar ones, wounded ones, ones that feel like home, because home was where the wound began. This is the paradox of emotional trauma. The very thing that broke you becomes the thing you chase, not out of desire, but out of familiarity. It's called a trauma bond, and it has nothing to do with logic. It's the nervous system's desperate attempt to resolve the past by reenacting it, over and over again. You don't fall for them because they're good for you. You fall because their inconsistency feels like childhood, because their silence reminds you of a parent's absence, because their criticism echoes what you already believe about yourself, and your mind tells you it's love, because pain is what love used to feel like. So you stay, even when it hurts, even when they don't show up, even when you shrink around them. You wait for them to change. You hope that if you love hard enough, they'll finally choose you. But deep down, you're not trying to love them. You're trying to win the love you were denied as a child. That's the trap. The wound seeks resolution, not truth. It's why you ignore red flags, why you justify being mistreated, why you say they're just wounded too, as if that makes the pain okay. But healing doesn't come from reliving the story. It comes from breaking the cycle. You don't have to prove your worth to someone who withholds love. You don't have to chase the one who mirrors your pain. You don't have to stay just because it feels familiar. The trauma bond isn't love. It's your nervous system clinging to what it once called safety. And the moment you recognize that, the moment you say, "This isn't love, it's a memory," you begin to reclaim your power. Healing starts when you stop seeking love where it was never truly given, not because you're unworthy, but because you're finally ready to give that love to yourself. There's a moment, small, sharp, and almost invisible. Someone says something, or doesn't, and suddenly your chest tightens, your voice sharpens, or you go completely silent. This is a trigger, but not in the way social media memes use the word. A real trigger isn't about weakness, it's about wounds. Emotional triggers are psychological flashpoints, the present moment touching a pain that never healed in the past. And when that pain is buried, your reaction doesn't make sense to the world, or even to you. Why did I overreact? Why did that one sentence feel like an attack? Why am I crying over something so small? Because it's not about the thing, it's about what it represents. Every trigger is a signal, a flare fired by the unconscious, and behind that flare is something deeper, the shadow. Carl Jung called the shadow the hidden, rejected part of yourself. All the thoughts, feelings, and desires you were told were too much, too ugly, or too dangerous, so you buried them. The anger you weren't allowed to show, the tears you had to swallow, the voice you silenced to keep the peace. But the shadow doesn't disappear, it festers. And when it finds a crack, a trigger, it explodes outward or turns inward. You lash out, you shut down, you hate yourself for feeling anything at all. But here's the paradox. What you repress controls you, and what you accept transforms you. Your triggers aren't enemies, they're invitations to meet the child inside you who felt powerless, to feel the grief you weren't allowed to express, to reclaim the pieces of yourself you exiled just to be loved. But be warned, the ego will resist. It wants to maintain the illusion of control. It says, "They made me feel this way." But healing says, "They activated what was already there." You don't heal by avoiding the trigger. You heal by sitting with it, by listening to what it's trying to teach you, by holding space for the pain, without judgment, without shame. Because every trigger is a teacher, and behind the emotion is an unmet need, waiting to be seen. You've read the books, listened to the podcasts, told yourself 1,000 times, "I know better now." And yet, the patterns return, the sadness creeps back in, the fear still hijacks your voice, the overthinking still keeps you up at night. Why? Because trauma doesn't live in the mind, It lives in the body. You can't outthink a wound that was never formed through logic. You can't reason with a part of you that was never spoken to with words. Emotional trauma embeds itself in the nervous system, in how you flinch, freeze, fawn, or fight, often before you even know what's happening. That's why someone's tone can make you feel small, why intimacy feels suffocating, why rest feels unsafe. You don't need more information. You need integration. This is where somatic healing comes in, the process of listening to the body, not just the mind. It might mean shaking, breathing, crying, trembling. Not because you're broken, but because your body is releasing what it had to hold for years. In trauma, the body says, "I'm not safe." In healing, you teach it to say, "I am." It's also why techniques like inner child work, or IFS, internal family systems, are so powerful, because they don't try to fix you from the outside. They help you turn inward, to connect with the forgotten parts, the protector, the exile, the wounded child. You start to recognize that your anger was shielding your grief, your numbness was protecting your overwhelm, your anxiety was your body saying, "Something's not right here." The goal is not to force yourself to be happy, it's to create safety inside yourself. Because when the body feels safe, the mind no longer has to scream, and that's the turning point, when healing stops being a performance and becomes a relationship with your body, with your emotions, with the self you abandoned in the name of survival. Healing doesn't mean going back in time. You can't rewrite the past. You can't force them to apologize. You can't make them love you the way you needed. But you can do something even more powerful. You can learn to become what you needed. This is the heart of reparenting, the process of showing up for yourself as the safe, consistent, and loving presence you may have never had. It starts small, telling yourself, "It's okay to feel this," letting yourself rest without shame, saying no without guilt, setting boundaries that protect your peace, not just your relationships. Because for many, childhood meant conditional love, love only when you performed, only when you were quiet, only when you didn't need too much. So now, when you try to give to yourself, you feel resistance. You hear the old voices, "Don't be selfish. You're too sensitive. You should be over this by now." But here's the truth. Those voices were never yours. You inherited them from people who never healed themselves. Reparenting means replacing those voices with new ones, your own. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present. Ask yourself, what did I need to hear back then? What was I never allowed to feel? How can I give that to myself now? Sometimes it's sitting with a journal and writing a letter to your younger self. Sometimes it's comforting yourself after a hard day, not by numbing, but by listening. Sometimes it's unlearning the belief that your worth is tied to productivity. And yes, it's uncomfortable, because self-love, for those who've never known it, feels unnatural at first. But over time, something begins to shift. You no longer chase validation, because you're learning to validate yourself. You stop abandoning yourself to be chosen, because you've chosen you. This is what emotional maturity looks like. Not detachment, not invulnerability, but inner safety. The ability to be with your feelings without drowning in them, to hold your pain without hating yourself for it, to make decisions not from fear, but from self-respect. Because the parent you needed is not coming, but the adult you're becoming. That person can do what they couldn't. That person can say, "You deserved love back then," and you still do. You've felt the pain. You've seen the patterns. You've begun to meet the parts of yourself that were hidden, exiled, or shamed. Now comes the most radical act of healing: integration. Because healing isn't just about understanding your wounds, It's about embracing the parts of you those wounds created. The anger, the control, the neediness, the fear, the bitterness. These are not flaws. They are protectors, created by a younger you who didn't know how else to survive. Integration means no longer pushing them away. It means saying, I see you. I know why you're here, and I'm not going to exile you anymore. Carl Jung called this the process of becoming whole, not by eliminating the shadow, but by bringing it into the light, because the parts of you hide are often the same parts that hold your power. That rage you fear, it's your lost voice. That jealousy, it's a cry for your forgotten needs. That fear of abandonment, it's your heart's way of asking to be seen. When you integrate your shadow, you stop blaming others. You stop needing villains in your story. You stop repeating the same dynamics because you no longer need the external world to mirror your internal wounds. This is how you break the cycle. You don't wait for someone to finally treat you right. You treat yourself right. You don't wait to be chosen. You choose you. You stop performing for love and start living in truth, even if it means being alone for a while. This is not easy, because the familiar pain is tempting, because change threatens the identities you built to stay safe. But you must ask yourself, am I protecting my past or creating my future? Because the cycle doesn't end when others change. It ends when you stop betraying yourself to keep the peace, when you stop repeating what you never deserved in the first place. Integration is messy, it's not aesthetic, it won't look good on social media, but it's real, and real healing feels like this: less chaos, more clarity, less chasing, more choosing, less fear, more peace, not perfection, but wholeness. Healing doesn't have a finish line. There's no final form, no gold medal for emotional growth. No moment where you'll wake up and say, I'm completely fixed now. Because healing isn't about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you were before the pain taught you to forget. You will still feel things. You will still have hard days. The scars remain, but they don't have to define you. They become part of your story, not your identity. And maybe that's the point. Not to erase the past, but to carry it differently. You no longer need to run from your pain because you've learned how to hold it. You no longer need to scream for validation because you've begun to validate yourself. You no longer need to chase love because you've discovered that you are the source. The journey of healing is the journey of coming home to yourself, and it's not linear. Sometimes you'll fall back into old patterns. Sometimes you'll question if you've made any progress at all, but pause and look deeper. Are you more aware of your triggers than you used to be? Do you pause before reacting now? Do you feel a bit more compassion, a bit more softness toward the parts of you that once felt unlovable? That's healing, not in giant leaps, but in quiet returns, to your body, to your breath, to the little voice inside that says, you're allowed to be here, exactly as you are. So if you're still in the storm, keep going. If you feel stuck, you're not broken, you're becoming. This path is not for the faint of heart. It takes courage to face yourself, to meet the pain you once buried, to sit in the silence you once feared, to become the love you were waiting for. But in that sacred becoming, you will find something no one can take from you. Wholeness, not perfection, not numbness, but the deep, steady truth that you are no longer split in two. You are no longer chasing completion outside yourself, because you are home now. You are whole, and that is where real healing begins.